I got the call at 3 a.m. My daughter Emma was sobbing so hard I couldn't understand her words. When I finally made out, "Dad, I need help," I was already reaching for my car keys. My name is Robert. I'm 54 years old, senior partner at Henderson and Associates Financial Consulting. I've spent the last 28 years building portfolios and protecting assets for high net worth clients. I never imagined I'd need to protect my own daughter from the family I welcomed into our lives. That midnight call came exactly 18 months after I'd signed the deed transfer papers. 18 months after I'd handed over the keys to a $847,000 house in Riverside Heights to my daughter and her new husband, Marcus. What I thought was the beginning of their American dream had become Emma's nightmare. 2 years earlier, Emma brought Marcus home for Thanksgiving. He was everything a father hopes for in a son-in-law: articulate, ambitious, respectful. At 29, he worked as a project manager for a mid-sized construction company, had his sights set on starting his own firm within 5 years. "Mr. Henderson," he said, standing to shake my hand with exactly the right amount of firmness. "Emma's told me so much about your work. I'd love to hear your perspective on commercial real estate investment sometime." His parents, David and Margaret Powell, were equally impressive. David ran a small but successful plumbing business he'd built from nothing. Margaret taught elementary school for 23 years before retiring. They spoke proudly of Marcus's work ethic, how he'd put himself through college working construction summers. "We raised him to understand that nothing comes without hard work," David told me over dinner. "Family supports family, but everyone pulls their weight." Margaret nodded, adding, "Marcus has always been our ambitious one. His brothers are good boys, but Marcus has the drive to really make something of himself." The wedding was beautiful. Emma looked radiant in her grandmother's dress, Marcus sharp in his rented tux. During his speech, he talked about building a life together, about the importance of family, about how grateful he was to be joining ours. "Emma's father has shown me what it means to be a provider," he said, raising his glass toward me. "I promise to take care of your daughter the way she deserves." 6 months later, they were house hunting. Emma would call me excited about each showing, Marcus always practical about the finances. When they found the house in Riverside Heights, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, granite countertops, 2-car garage, the asking price was $847,000. "Dad, it's perfect," Emma said during our Sunday lunch. "But the mortgage payments would be almost 60% of our combined income." Marcus was more direct. "Sir, I've run the numbers every way I can think of. We can make it work, but there wouldn't be much left over for savings or emergencies. I don't want to put Emma in a financially precarious position." I respected his honesty. Here was a young man who understood his limitations, who was thinking long-term about my daughter's security. That evening, I called my attorney. "I want to buy them a house," I told James Morrison, who'd been handling my legal affairs for 15 years. "But I want it done right. If something happens to the marriage, I want Emma protected." James drafted a 3-way agreement. I would purchase the house outright. Emma would hold title with Marcus as a joint owner, but with specific provisions. If they divorced within the first 10 years, Emma would retain full ownership. Marcus would need to maintain employment and contribute to household expenses. Any major changes to the property would require my approval as the original purchaser. Marcus read through the agreement carefully, asked thoughtful questions about the clauses. "Mr. Henderson, I want to make sure I understand this correctly. You're essentially gifting us this house, but with protections for Emma?" "That's right. I'm not trying to control your marriage, Marcus. I'm just making sure my daughter has security." He nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, sir, and I appreciate your trust in me." We signed the papers on a Tuesday in March. That weekend, we all helped them move in. David and Margaret brought casseroles and helped Emma set up the kitchen. Marcus's 2 brothers, Jake and Tony, helped carry furniture. It felt like a celebration, like the foundation of something lasting. For the first 3 months, everything seemed perfect. Emma would text me photos of the garden she was planting, the home office Marcus was setting up. When I'd visit for Sunday dinners, the house felt warm, lived in, happy. But by summer, I started noticing small things. Emma seemed tired more often. When I'd ask about work, she'd mention being behind on projects, having to work late. Marcus would jump in with comments about how Emma needed to be more organized, how she was still learning to manage a household along with her career. "It's an adjustment," he'd say with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Living in a real house instead of an apartment. More space means more responsibility." During one visit, I noticed Emma's hands. She'd always been meticulous about her manicures, a small vanity she'd inherited from her mother. Now her nails were short, practical, and her hands looked rough. Emma, what happened to your nails? She glanced at Marcus before answering. Oh, I've been doing more housework. You know how it is with a bigger place. Marcus laughed. She's become quite the homemaker, really taking pride in keeping our house perfect. Something about the way he said our house bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on why. The next month, I dropped by unannounced on a Saturday afternoon. Emma answered the door in old clothes, her hair tied back, looking exhausted. Dad, I wasn't expecting you. Just wanted to see how you're settling in. Is Marcus around? He's at his parents' house, family barbecue. She paused. I couldn't make it. I had to finish cleaning the garage. I looked past her into the house. Everything was spotless, almost obsessively so. The hardwood floors gleamed, the granite countertops were pristine, even the baseboards looked freshly scrubbed. Emma, this place is immaculate. What cleaning needed to be done? She shrugged. Marcus likes things a certain way, and with both of us working, weekends are really the only time to deep clean. Where's Marcus's contribution to the deep cleaning? Her silence was answer enough. Over the following weeks, I started paying closer attention. Emma's phone calls became shorter, more guarded. When I'd ask about weekend plans, she'd mention household projects, never social activities. The vibrant, confident daughter I'd raised was becoming someone I barely recognized. The turning point came during a family dinner at my house in October. Emma arrived alone. Where's Marcus? He's having dinner with his family. His mom made pot roast. And you weren't invited? Emma's cheeks flushed. I was invited, but someone needed to prep for the week. Marcus has a big presentation Monday, and I wanted to make sure his shirts were pressed and his materials were organized. I set down my fork. Emma, you work 50 hours a week yourself. When do you prep for your own presentations? I manage, Dad. Marriage is about supporting each other. What does Marcus do to support you? She couldn't answer. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I called James Morrison. James, I want to know exactly what my options are regarding that house. And I want to know what Marcus Powell's been up to since he married my daughter. Bob, are you sure about this? Private investigations can open doors you might not want to walk through. My daughter is disappearing, James. I need to know why. The private investigator I hired, Sarah Chen, was thorough and discreet. Within 2 weeks, she had a preliminary report that made my blood run cold. Marcus hadn't just moved his nuclear family into Emma's life. He'd positioned himself as the central figure in an extended family economic structure. His parents had sold their house 6 months after the wedding, claiming they wanted to downsize. Instead, they'd moved into a small apartment and were essentially living day-to-day at Emma's house. They're there every evening by 4 p.m., Sarah reported. Margaret cooks dinner, but Emma does all the cleanup. David brings his work tools and has basically set up shop in the garage. Both brothers are over most weekends, and Emma's doing their laundry. The financial picture was even more disturbing. Marcus had kept his job, but his paychecks were going into an account that supported his entire family. The household expenses, utilities, groceries, maintenance were coming entirely from Emma's income and credit cards. She's essentially financing the living expenses for 5 adults, Sarah continued. Marcus is contributing nothing to the household budget. But the worst part was the emotional manipulation Sarah had observed. Marcus had developed a pattern of public praise and private criticism. In front of others, he'd brag about Emma's dedication and work ethic. Behind closed doors, he'd criticize her performance, her appearance, her inability to manage everything perfectly. He's isolated her from her friends systematically, Sarah explained. Every social invitation gets filtered through what Marcus's family needs. Emma's world has shrunk to work and serving this family. I needed to see this for myself, but I couldn't just show up unannounced repeatedly without raising suspicion. That's when I came up with the vacation plan. Marcus, I said during our next family dinner, I've been thinking about taking a week off, maybe going up to the cabin, but I hate for it to sit empty most of the year. Would you and your family be interested in using it for a week? Consider it an early Christmas present. His eyes lit up immediately. Mr. Henderson, that's incredibly generous. The whole family? Of course, David and Margaret, your brothers, whoever wants to come. It's a big place, plenty of room. Marcus was practically vibrating with excitement. Emma, isn't this amazing? A week in the mountains, all expenses paid. I watched Emma's face. Instead of excitement, I saw panic. That sounds wonderful, Dad. When were you thinking? How about next week? I know it's short notice, but I could use the time to catch up on some projects. Marcus was already planning. We could leave Monday, come back the following Sunday. Dad, you and Mom are going to love it. Jake, Tony, this is perfect timing. Then he turned to Emma with that smile that was becoming familiar. Emma, sweetie, you should probably stay home, though. You've got that big client presentation coming up, and honestly, the house could use a deep clean while we're gone. You know how your father likes things perfect. I felt my jaw clench. Actually, Marcus, I think Emma should come. She's been working so hard lately. Oh, but Mr. Henderson, Emma's got so much on her plate. And someone should keep an eye on the house. You know how it is with break-ins these days? Emma nodded quickly. It's fine, Dad. Really, I could use the quiet time to prepare for work. That night, I called James Morrison again. I need security cameras installed in Emma's house. Professional grade, discreet, the works. Bob, you can't just install surveillance in someone else's home. It's my house, James. I bought it. I still have legal standing as the original purchaser. But more importantly, I'm going to get Emma's permission. The next evening, I visited Emma while Marcus was at his parents' house. I found her in the kitchen, scrubbing the stove with the kind of intensity that suggested she was working out frustration. Emma, we need to talk. She looked up, startled. Dad, what's wrong? I'm worried about you, really worried. Her shoulders sagged. I'm fine, Dad, just tired. Are you happy? The question hung in the air. Emma's eyes filled with tears she quickly wiped away. Marriage is work, Dad. You and Mom always said that. Your mother and I worked together, Emma. We didn't work for each other. I sat down at the kitchen table, patted the chair next to me. I want to install some security cameras around the house. High-end system, discreet. For your safety. Dad, that's not necessary. Emma, please, let me do this for my own peace of mind. These are good neighborhoods, but break-ins happen. I want to know you're safe when you're here alone. She was quiet for a long moment. Just don't tell Marcus right away, okay? He gets funny about spending money on things he thinks are unnecessary. This isn't his money, Emma, it's mine. The next day, while Marcus and his family were loading up for their mountain vacation, I had a full surveillance system installed. 12 cameras, interior and exterior, all feeding to a secure server I could access remotely. Marcus hugged Emma goodbye with theatrical affection. Are you sure you don't want to come, sweetheart? It's not too late to change your mind. I'm sure. You all have fun. As they drove away, I saw Emma's shoulders relax for the first time in months. That evening, I started monitoring the feeds. Emma moved through the house like she was discovering it for the first time. She took a long bath, made herself a simple dinner, and sat in the living room reading. Something I hadn't seen her do in months. When Marcus's family returned the following Sunday, everything changed. The cameras captured David immediately claiming the garage as his permanent workspace. Margaret rearranged the kitchen to her preferences. Jake and Tony spread their belongings throughout the house like they were marking territory. And Marcus had transformed into someone I didn't recognize. Emma, what the hell is this? His voice carried clearly through the kitchen camera's audio. He was holding up a coffee mug that had been left in the sink. I'm sorry, I was just about to wash it. You had an entire week to deep clean this house. 1 week, Emma, and I come home to dirty dishes? I worked late every night, Marcus. I didn't have time to... You didn't have time? You had more time this week than you've had in months. No family obligations, no cooking for everyone, no helping with Dad's projects. Just you in this house. I watched my daughter shrink into herself. I'm sorry, I'll get everything cleaned up. You're damn right you will. And next time I do something nice for you, like giving you a week to catch up on your responsibilities, maybe you'll show some appreciation. Over the following days, the cameras revealed the true dynamic of Emma's marriage. She would wake up at 5 a.m. to prepare breakfast for 5 adults. She'd work a full day, then come home to cook dinner for everyone. After dinner, she'd clean up while the family watched television or worked on their projects. She'd do everyone's laundry, including Marcus's brother's clothes. She'd fall into bed exhausted around midnight, then wake up 5 hours later to start again. Meanwhile, Marcus contributed nothing to the household expenses but acted like the king of the castle. He'd criticize Emma's cooking, complain about the cleanliness of the house, and demand she reorganize her work schedule around his family's needs. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I was reviewing the evening feeds when I saw something that made me call James Morrison immediately. James, I need you to get down here right now and bring Detective Rodriguez with you. What's wrong? I just watched 5 people discuss how to fraudulently claim Emma's house as their primary residence for tax purposes. And that's just the beginning. The financial fraud was more extensive than I'd imagined. Marcus had been using Emma's address to apply for small business loans, claiming he lived there rent-free due to family assistance. His parents had been collecting social services they weren't entitled to by claiming they were caring for Emma as a disabled dependent. His brothers had been using the address for unemployment benefits while working under-the-table jobs. But the loan fraud was the most serious. Marcus had taken out a $157,000 business loan using Emma's house as collateral, forging her signature on the paperwork. The loan was supposed to fund his construction company startup, but the money had been funneled into day trading accounts that had lost nearly everything. He's put your daughter at risk for federal fraud charges, Detective Rodriguez explained. If this had continued, Emma could have been charged as a co-conspirator. The surveillance footage also revealed escalating emotional abuse. Marcus had begun threatening Emma when she didn't meet his standards, telling her she was worthless, that no one else would put up with her incompetence. Your father thinks he's so smart, I heard him say during one particularly cruel session. But he can't protect you from me. This is my house now, and you're my wife. You do what I say when I say it. That night, I watched Emma cry herself to sleep in the bedroom of the house I'd bought for her happiness. The next morning, I put my plan into action. Marcus, I called him at work. I've been thinking about that business loan you mentioned. I'd like to discuss potentially backing your construction company. Mr. Henderson, that's amazing. I mean, I wasn't expecting... Why don't we meet for lunch today? Just us men. I want to understand your vision. We met at the downtown steakhouse where I'd taken Emma for her high school graduation. Marcus arrived early, dressed in his best suit, carrying a folder of business plans. Sir, I can't tell you how much this means to me. Having your backing would change everything. Tell me about the financing you've already secured. He shifted uncomfortably. Well, I've been exploring various options. Traditional bank loans, that kind of thing. Any success? Some promising leads, nothing finalized yet. I smiled. Marcus, I've been in financial services for nearly 30 years. I have contacts at every major bank in the region. Which institutions have you been working with? The color drained from his face. I've been keeping my options open. Of course, smart approach. I leaned forward. Here's what I'm going to do, Marcus. I'm going to offer you a choice. Sir? Option 1. You and your entire family are out of my daughter's house by this weekend. You sign divorce papers giving Emma full ownership of the property. You disappear from her life completely. Mr. Henderson, I don't understand. Option 2. I call Detective Rodriguez and have you arrested for loan fraud, forgery, and theft. Your parents get charged with benefits fraud. Your brothers get charged with unemployment fraud. Marcus's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo from the surveillance footage. Him and his father discussing the loan application at Emma's kitchen table. Smile, Marcus, you're on camera. For the next 10 minutes, I laid out everything I knew. The forged signatures, the fraudulent addresses, the stolen money, the systematic abuse of my daughter. With each revelation, Marcus sank deeper into his chair. How long have you been watching us? Long enough to build a federal case against you. Long enough to document every lie you've told, every dollar you've stolen, every time you've hurt my daughter. Emma doesn't know about any of this. Emma is a victim, Marcus. You've been using her home as the base for a criminal enterprise while treating her like unpaid domestic help. I leaned back in my chair. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go home today and tell your family that you need to move out immediately. You're going to tell Emma that you've realized you're not ready for marriage. You're going to sign whatever divorce papers my attorney puts in front of you. And if I don't, then I make some phone calls, and by tonight, you're all in federal custody. Marcus stared at me for a long moment. You've been planning this. I've been protecting my daughter, something you swore to do 18 months ago. That evening, I got a call from Emma. She was crying, but this time it was different. Dad, Marcus says he wants a divorce. He says he's not ready for marriage, that he made a mistake. How do you feel about that, sweetheart? I should be devastated, shouldn't I? But, Dad, I feel relieved. Is that terrible? No, Emma, that's not terrible at all. The divorce was finalized within 60 days. Marcus signed over all rights to the house without contest. His family moved out that same weekend, taking their tools, their belongings, and their schemes with them. Emma kept the house. She also kept the security system, though she uses it now for actual security rather than evidence gathering. She's back to her old self, confident, successful, surrounded by friends she'd been isolated from. 6 months later, Marcus was arrested for attempting the same loan fraud scheme with another victim. His parents lost their benefits and faced criminal charges. His brothers were charged with unemployment fraud. Last Sunday, Emma and I were sitting in her kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd watched her be systematically broken down and rebuilt. Dad, can I ask you something? Anything. When did you know? I thought about it. I think I knew something was wrong when you stopped doing your nails. You'd never let your appearance go unless something was seriously wrong. She laughed. My manicures gave me away? Your mother always said that a woman who stops taking care of herself is a woman who's forgotten her worth. Emma looked at her hands, perfectly manicured now, painted a bright red that matched her renewed confidence. I almost forgot, didn't I? For a while, but you remembered in time. 3 weeks ago, Emma started dating someone new, a doctor she met at a conference who seems genuinely interested in her work, her thoughts, her dreams. When he comes to Sunday dinner, he brings flowers and asks about her projects. He's never once suggested she change anything about herself. Marcus, meanwhile, is serving 2 to 5 years for fraud and embezzlement. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about orchestrating Marcus's downfall. The answer is simple. I didn't orchestrate anything. I just documented what was already happening and made sure there were consequences for criminal behavior. I spent 28 years building financial security for my family. I wasn't about to let some small-time con artist destroy my daughter's future for the sake of his family's get-rich-quick schemes. The house in Riverside Heights is worth $1.2 million now. Emma lives there happily, securely, and most importantly, freely. She's learned to trust her instincts again, to value her own worth, and to recognize the difference between partnership and exploitation. Marcus learned something too, that underestimating a father's love for his daughter is a mistake that can cost you everything. But the most important lesson was mine. Sometimes protecting the people you love means being willing to take off the gloves and fight dirty. Sometimes being a good father means being a very bad enemy. Emma's happy, Emma's safe, Emma's free. And that's worth more than any house I could ever buy. Subscribe if you agree.